We go to chapter 40, the World Trade Organization and World Trade Patterns, WTO. And the director of the World Trade, or the president of the World Trade is a Nigerian. Professor Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. It's a woman.
So,
Yeah,
that's good.
it's a Nigerian. She studies economics anyway. So we'll go down. The World Trade Organization. The WTO was established in 1995, replacing a similar body called General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, GATT. The WTO has 164 members and employs over 600 people, including lawyers, economists, statisticians, and communication experts. In 2015, the WTO had a budget of over $195 million. The WTO promotes free trade by persuading countries to abolish tariffs and other trade barriers. It has become closely associated with globalization. So for the WTO, they are organizations that try to negotiate with countries to stop trade restriction. They want free trade. They want international trade amongst countries. So that is their main objective. That is why they have been set up. Okay. So the WTO is the only international agency overseeing the rules of international trade. So it's in charge of international trade, the WTO. Its policies free trade agreement settles trade disputes between government and organized trade negotiations. So because we say it's the only body that is in charge or saddled with the responsibility of international trade, it means whatever happens with international trade, the WTO is in charge. Settlement of disputes among members, trade negotiation, they are the one in charge. WTO decisions are final and every member must abide by its ruling. So whatever the WTO says, it's the final. In as much as I remember, you have to follow suit. So when the US and the EU are in dispute over bananas or beef, it is WTO that acts as a judge and jury. WTO members have the power to enforce WTO decisions by punishing countries that are breaking the rules. The main activities of the WTO are outlined below. So before we go to the main activities of the WTO, in as much as you are a member, whatever policies that the WTO comes up with, or whoever WTO sanctions, you can sanction that country too. So maybe, example, country X is being sanctioned by the WTO. If you don't want country X to deal with your country, it will not, because you are a member of the WTO. Do you understand? So what are the activities of the WTO? The first one, trade negotiation. We know what trade is already. Buying and selling, import and export. So the WTO aims to reduce or eliminate trade barriers through negotiation. It does this by encouraging countries to draw up trading agreements covering matters such as anti-dumping, subsidies, and product standards. The WTO aims to bring about trade liberalization. That means moving towards removal of trade barriers. That's liberalization.
Yeah.
So basically, what the trade union wants is free trade. Though it is not, it's an organization. You cannot force countries to do what you want. So the only thing you could do is to negotiate with them. Okay, country A, what are your trade conditions? Let's see your trade conditions. Draw up a trade condition, let's say. So if your trading conditions are drawn, the WTO will look at it with an expert view to see if adjustment can be made on it, and they negotiate with you so that if it is so difficult for other countries to come into your country with their own, negotiation, and you might reach a compromise to reduce or to what do we use for them? To reconsider your trade conditions so that it becomes lenient for other members to be part of, or other countries to be part of trade relationship with you. So that's what they do. And at the end of it all, the main objective is to reach trade liberalization, canceling trade barriers, free trade. That is where they're going. So that's one of the activities too. Implementing and monitoring. So the WTO employs various councils and committees to administer and monitor the application of the WTO rules for trade in goods, services, and intellectual property rights. So since they are the only body that is in charge of international trade, so they need policies, they need guidelines, yes or no? So the trade union, the WTO, the World Trade Organization would not only come up with guidelines or policies, they also have to monitor, check, and balance that it is really being used, it is executed, it's enforceable. So they make guidelines, they make rules, they make policies, and they ensure that some committees are in charge of compliance. That is implementation and monitoring. It's clear. The third one, settling trade disputes. So there's always going to be trade disagreement. There's always going to be conflicts among members and non-members. So the WTO has to come into the middle to ensure that things get better. That's about that. I think it's clear. They resolve problems regarding international trade, building memberships. Because what they try to do with all these activities they do, they will encourage more countries to join. Yes or no?
Is Libya in the
World Trade Organization? I don't know. I need to check. But I know Nigeria is part of the World Trade Organization. It should be. Yeah, you can check. I think it says. Check. World Trade Organization members.
Libya is not WTO.
It's not part of WTO.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now you know anyway.
Libya is one of the 20 countries that are yet to join.
That are non-members. Okay. So that's about Libya. Okay. Nigeria is there anyway.
Yeah.
So we move on. Criticisms of the WTO. Maybe these are the reasons why some countries have not been part of are not part of them. Despite what seems to be good intentions of the WTO, it does face criticism. This comes mainly from anti-globalization bodies and environmental groups. For example, Global Exchange, a body that promotes people-centered globalization, makes the following claims about WTO. One, it is undemocratic because the WTO rules are written by and for corporations. The views of consumers, environmentalists, human rights, and labor organizations are often ignored. So the first problem the first criticism about WTO is that, according to the Global Exchange, it is undemocratic. Why do they use the word undemocratic? They use the word undemocratic because members come up with these laws. They don't put into consideration, they don't hear the view of non-members. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And if we are talking about if we are talking about globalization, it means involvement of everybody. But if you call it World Trade Organization, and you're making policies that are against or that does not talk about labor, that does not talk about environment, that does not put these things into consideration, then it's not talking about the world. So that's the first criticism. Do you get how it is undemocratic here? It is not it is undemocratic because it does not consider people. Because democracy is the government of the people, for the people and by the people. So if it is not about the people, then it is not democratic. That's the first problem. The second one, it favors the rights of corporations over those of workers. For example, the WTO has ruled that it is illegal for the government to ban products based on the way it is produced, such as with child labor. It has also ruled that government cannot take into account non-commercial values, such as human rights when making purchasing decisions. So it said it favors the rights of corporations over those of workers. So basically, these laws, these rules they make are in favor of businesses, not the workers. So that means those are what we call unethical, those ethical stances, ethical stances, they don't care about it. Child labor, whatever it is, they don't care. The only thing they want to see is production, import, and export.
Yeah.
So they don't consider workers, even if they are, they are being exploited. They don't. It's not their business.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So that's not good enough anyway. The third one, it is destroying the environment. There's no way we want to produce without damaging the environment. And if World Trade Organization is still existing and encouraging international trade, that means damaging of the environment will continue. The fourth one, it favors wealthy nations over poorer ones. For example, negotiations from poor countries are not even invited to meetings, and then agreements are announced that poor countries do not even know where being discussed. Look at what they say there. So if there is disagreement between a poor country or a poor nation and a wealthy nation, they won't invite the poor nation. They won't invite them. They will only make judgment and you have to follow suit.
Yeah.
And that will always favor the wealthy ones.
Like US.
Yes. It is causing hardship for poorer nations. Farmers produce enough food in the world to feed everyone. However, it is argued that the population control of food distribution means millions of people worldwide suffer from lack of food. In developing countries, as many as 4 out of every 5 people make their living from the land. But the WTO insists that market forces should control agricultural policies rather than a commitment to food security and adequate incomes for farmers. The WTO does not care about the source of what we eat. All they care about is those that supply what we eat.
Yeah.
So it means farmers is not their own, it's not their problem. They don't care about farmers, they don't care about the land. So all they care about is the final product.
Yeah.
And which is not good enough. They need to prioritize the source so that farmers, that's why the primary sector is the most is the poorest or is the cheapest of all sectors in the economy. It's one of the reasons is because of the WTO. They don't place references to the primary sector. And this is the source, the main source of whatever we eat in terms of food. Is it clear? So go to world trade patterns. So go to world trade patterns. When we talk about world trade patterns, we're talking about changes that has occurred during world trade. So let's see. World trade has increased enormously in the last 55 years. There is a figure above which we don't know anyway. So the total world export have been accelerating rapidly, particularly since 1985. Here are some reasons why this has happened. So world trade must involve import and export. And basically what they are trying to say is that world export has increased over the years. So what are the reasons why there's increase in exportation over the years? Number one, better transport and communications. More efficient transport systems mean that goods can be shipped more quickly and cheaply. This reduces the cost of selling goods abroad and therefore makes them more attractive to buy. Developments in ICT, such as the internet, means that buyers and sellers can communicate more easily. For example, consumers can buy goods online from sellers all over the world. So the first reason why we have increasing exports over the years is because there is better transportation and communication. And when we talk about better transportation system, it means maybe there are different systems, there are different ways in which we can transport. Now there's improvement in air transportation, there's improvement in ship transportation, or water transportation, there's improvement in road transportation. All these things, when you put them together, it makes movement of goods and services to be easier. As a result, things become cheaper. So that's the point there. Then for communication, ICT has, development of ICT, communication technology. This has really enabled people to, to have close contacts, to see each other like they're just closer to each other, like they're not far away from each other. So that means buyers and sellers can virtually communicate without any hindrance. So, and if we are able to communicate well, if we are able to dispatch information, if we are able to get information from one another, it means it becomes easier for us to trade.
Yeah.
So trading activity becomes easier because there's information, there's advancement in technology, and there's improvement in communication, which involves transportation.
Yeah.
Is the first point clear?
Yeah.
The second point, relaxing of trade barriers. Since the 1930s, countries have realized that protectionism does not help economic growth. As a result, nations have discussed ways of increasing free trade. There have been rounds of negotiation in Tokyo, Uruguay, and more recently, Doha. At these meetings, national leaders discuss trade matters and sign agreements to reduce tariffs and quotas. Relaxing of trade barriers, that means reducing trade restrictions.
Making it easy.
Like quotas, tariffs, ban, embargo, all these things. So why are governments of countries relaxing these trade barriers? Government of countries have realized that when you protect infant industries, you're not going to develop. One of the reasons why when you protect infant industries that you might not develop is that those infant industries might rely on you. They might not be effective because they know that government, whatever happens, government is there to protect them. So if they are not reliable, if they are not efficient, no matter how much protection you give to them, they will not increase their output. Do you understand? So for economy to grow, you need international relationship. It is not just domestic. That's why closed economy would not really work. Do you understand? So governments of countries have realized that. As a result, they start softening the regulations. They start reducing barriers or trade barriers so that there will be trade relationship. Import and export could flow. Do you get that? Another reason why they are relaxing trade barriers is because there could be retaliation. I told you about retaliation yesterday. If country A stops country B from country A stops country B from bringing exports, then country B might also as well not import from country A. That's retaliation. So if we continue to retaliate, then we'll be short of goods, we'll be short of services, which is not good for anybody. So as a result, they have to soften those laws so that there's interaction, so that there's relationship, there's agreement, there's cooperation. That's the second point. The third one, development of multinationals. A lot of world trade has been driven by large MNCs. Their aim is to increase sales around the world and produce goods in locations that allow them to minimize their cost. As a result, they have sold an increasing range of goods and services to an increasing number of countries. Multinationals. Multinationals want to set up in countries where they can find, cheap, maybe raw materials, cheap labor, and whatever it's going to be cost effective for them.
Yeah.
Maybe lower taxes and the rest. So, because these multinationals are setting up in different countries, it brings about trade relationship. Do you get it?
Yeah.
So, as long as they are able to set up in those countries, it increases the output of that country, and which means exportation would increase. Do you get the point there? The next one, travel and consumer awareness. When you see an increase in travel, consumers are more prepared to buy goods from other countries. They welcome greater choice and recognize that imports can satisfy a growing number of needs and needs. Consumers now, they have access to information. They travel everywhere. They travel around the world. They see things. They compare. They compare services in Turkey. They compare hotel services in Turkey with hotel services in Ireland. So they go out, they see. So they have access to more information than before. So it means they know what is good for them, what is not good for them. So they know the importance of importation. As a result, they want to do international relationship. They want to import. Do you understand what I'm saying there? They understand what it means to have imported products. They know the value. They know the quality it brings about. It brings along. So this accessibility allows more international relationship or international trade. Is it clear? The next reason why we have increasing export is trade agreements. Most countries in the world have trade agreements with their neighbors that are designed to encourage free trade. One important feature of this agreement is the formation of a trading bloc. Trade agreements. So trade agreement means both our import and export dealings, we both accept them. Conditions surrounding our imports and exports our imports and exports are all agreed upon. So country A, country B, country C, country B, we all come together in terms of how we want to relate. We all agree on them, on those conditions that comes with them. So that is trade agreement. And what does trade agreement brings about? It brings about encouraging trade. In as much as we agree, it means we can transact with each other. In as much as they agree, it means they can transact with each other. Without agreement, there won't be trade relationship. Is it clear? So as a result of having agreement in terms of trade, that is why we can do imports and we can do exports. I can sell to you more. I can sell to any country because we all agree. Is it clear? Trade in developed countries. Are you there? Yeah. Although developing nations are contributing an increasing amount of world trade to world trade, It's the developed nations. It is the developed nations that continue to dominate. So look at the developed nations. We have China, US, Germany, Japan, Netherlands, France, Korea, Italy, Hong Kong, UK, Australia. These are their contribution to in exports. China has the highest. Then importation, US and China are still the first two,
Yeah.
followed by Germany, Japan, UK. So these are the top importers, and these are the top exporters in the world. And they are all developed countries. Are you there?
Yeah.
So the next one is loss of trade in manufacturing. So another reason is why we have increasing exports is loss of trade in manufacturing. So these days, there's deindustrialization.
Yeah.
With deindustrialization, it means the service sector is increasing. Do you get the point? So because the service sector is increasing, it means people do more of exporting services.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Because now we don't think about production. There's nobody buys CD anymore for recordings.
Yeah,
Nobody buys. They stream them. Do you see? So things have changed. So nobody thinks about, yeah, you said something now.
No, it's different.
Okay. So nobody thinks about products. They think about service. So the world is evolving. So more of export of services is increasing. Do you get the point?
Yeah.
Then more air travel. People continue to travel the world in growing numbers. So there's globalization, the movement of people around the world. So if there's globalization, there will be trade relationship, there will be importation of goods, there will be importation of services, there will be exportation of goods, there will be exportation of services. Widening of the development gap. Although international trade is rising in developing countries and an increasing number of people are being removed from poverty, trade in developed countries is also growing as a result. The gap between the rich and poor nations is widening. Wow. Widening of development gap. You know, the problem here is that, yes, international trade is increasing, yes. But the problem about this thing is that the rich countries continue to be richer, while the poor countries continue to be poorer, based on maybe World Trade Organization policies.
Yeah.
So rich countries are always having that favorable condition, whereas poorer countries would not.
Yeah.
Do you get the point there?
Yeah.
Any question about that?
Yeah.
So we go to, okay, now we go to trade in developing countries. So this is about developed countries. So for developing countries, what are developing countries? These are countries that rely mostly on manufacturing or the secondary or the tertiary sector or the primary sector. For the developed countries, their reliance is on the tertiary sector. They start declining in the secondary sector. So for developing, like I said, so they said, okay, developing countries have increased their shares of world trade between 1995 and 2014. Okay, so let me just read anyway. For developing countries, they said an increase in net migration, an increasing number of people are leaving developing countries to find work in developed countries. For example, the numbers moving from between 1990 to 2013 rose from 82.3 million people to 185.6 million. Developing countries, one of the problems they have in terms of trade and exports is that there is what we call brain drain.
Yeah.
We discussed that before. So with brain drain, a lot of people are leaving the country, seeking for greener pasture, seeking for employment out of their country. And the more they leave, the less developed they become, because these people are those ones that are supposed to develop the country, but they are leaving. So when they leave, your country will not develop because there are no people to develop it.
A lot of countries in Africa, like this, like Libya, like a lot of them.
So that's one of the problems about developing countries. Two, increase FDI in Africa. Many African nations, are you there?
Yeah.
Many African nations have benefited from an increasing amount of FDI from China. This has helped to increase international trade in these nations. China is Africa's third largest trade partner, following the US and France. Total FDI in Africa has risen sharply in the last 20 years. In 1995, the FDI to sub-Saharan Africa was so for FDIs, FDIs have really helped developing countries. You know, the first problem about developing countries we talked about, there's brain drain. A lot of people are moving out of these countries to seek greener pasture in developed countries. Now, in developing countries, a lot of FDIs are coming in because they find out that that's where their costs can be more effective. There's cheap labor, there's availability of raw materials in developing countries, and they have large number of customer base from there. So it increases, they do more of the setup in developing countries. And doing that means that developing countries might be able to do more of exports. Do you get it on it?
Yes.
Developing countries, FDIs are increasing in developing countries. Why? They have large population, they have cheap labor, they have raw materials, and they do not know how to, to explore them. They don't have equipment, they don't have machinery. So FDIs will bring all these things there, and they will be welcomed because it allows them to develop.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, exports increases from developing countries. Is it clear? The third one, rising commodity dependence. Many developing countries rely heavily on commodities for international trade. For example, China's interest in Africa is largely down to its large quantities of natural resources. Like I told you earlier, developing countries, they have natural resources and they cannot convert them. They don't have the financial capability to get equipment, machinery, needed technology to convert these raw materials. So developing countries mostly rely on developing countries mostly rely on developed countries for these things. As a result, developed countries, businesses in developed countries, corporations in developed countries sees that as a gap, which they have to make a business out of. So they come to set up here. Yeah.
Give an example of like a
Sure.
real life example.
Yeah, sure. British Petroleum. There's petroleum in Libya. British Petroleum is Britain. It's a Britain company. It's a multinational. It's setting up here. Why is it setting up here? It's setting up here because it can explore here.
Yeah.
Do you get that?
Yeah.
Aside that, Nigeria, we have Shell, we have Mobil, we have Shell, we have Chevron. They are all in Nigeria, operating from Nigeria. Yeah. Why? Because Nigeria does not have oil rigs that would transform those oil, the crude oil, into different, because crude oil, you have petrol, you have diesel, you have kerosene, you have aviation kerosene, you have gas and the rest.
Yeah.
So the developing countries do not have the financial capability to get equipment, technology, machines needed to convert these raw materials into finished goods. So they invite multinationals to come set up. That's why Chevron will continue to be in Nigeria, Shell will continue to be in Nigeria, and the rest. Is it clear? Is a real life example here now? Great. Then we'll go on to debt cancellation. Yeah, I think we talked about debt cancellation here, or with maybe another story. We were talking about it through ways in which country. No, it's still in this. It's one of the lessons. Yeah, no, we didn't talk about it, but I discussed it with another thing. It was about how countries can help each other. So sometimes it's debt cancellation. So that means, oh, country A is owing country B. So we just cancel those. Oh, you are owing us, but we forgive you, just forget about it. That's what called debt cancellation. So developing countries will benefit from the cancellation of the entire 40 million debts owed by 40 million. No, 40 billion. Yeah, it's 40 billion. It's 40 billion. 40 billion US dollar debt owed by 18 highly indebted poor countries. The money saved may be invested to help these poor nations open up their economies and grow. So developing countries are owing around this over 40 billion. So what does it mean? If it is cancelled, it means those countries will not be paying back their debts, right? Yeah. and they can use this to, they can invest this on infrastructure, they can invest this on education, healthcare, and that might make them to, develop.
Yeah.
Fair. Reduction in barriers. The majority of World Trade Organization members are from developing countries, so they will probably welcome trade liberalization. The potential gains from removing trade barriers are considerable. Developing countries are likely to enjoy improving current balances if more trade barriers can be removed in the future. Developing countries, they have raw materials, right? And they rely mostly on exportation. So they always want to be part of the World Trade Organization. Get the point? So what happens when you are a member? It allows you to, to be able to export more. So developing countries would enjoy reduction in trade barriers because their reliance is always on exportation. They do more exports because they have raw materials. Multinationals are setting up in their countries to increase their output so that they can export.
Yeah.
One way or the other, it also affects their current account balance. Do you understand? So with reduction in trade restriction, developing countries might have improvements in their balance of trade, balance of payment current account. They might have improvements. Is it clear? Any questions about that? So go to the multiple choice questions. Yes, okay.
Definitely trade.
So which of the following is an activity of the WTO? Settling trade disputes between members.
I'm not sure because can you see the answers?
The answer is B.
Oh, that's good.
Now let me explain them. The first one, helping multinationals to develop their businesses overseas. It is not their business for countries, and it's not even countries that develop multinationals to set up. It's their directors that will do that. It's their company. So if they feel they want to set up, that means they feel that they want to expand. It is their own. It's part of their objective. So it's a company's objective if it wants to extend or expand into international markets. It's not about World Trade Organization. Clear?
Yeah.
So they don't help multinationals to develop their businesses abroad. They can't help them. Businesses will develop their business themselves.
Yeah.
Owners will develop their business, not WTO.
Yeah.
WTO can be their safeguard. They can give them the opportunity to export, but not to develop. Developing your product, developing your business is solely your own responsibility.
Yeah.
But with WTO, they can come up with policies that will allow international trade. And if that is possible, then multinationals can set up, but not to develop their business. So it's not A. And B, settling trade disputes between members. Yeah, it is B because you have to be a member of WTO. So as a member, one of their activity is to ensure that there's agreement between members, right? So that means if there's going to be agreement between members, there might have been conflicts before then. So they have to settle conflicts too. In as much as there's agreement, there will be disagreement. So it is this trade, the WTO, that stand in between the warring parties to solve their problems. So it's B. C, raising money for developing countries. No, they don't. They only make policies and not for developing countries, for members. Clear? Creating new types of trade barriers. No, they want free trade. So they want to reduce free trade, not to create one. Is it clear? So the answer is B. Question 2. By the graph, that's 40.5, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at 40.5. Okay. 40.5, yes.
Yeah, 40.5. This is
Where is it? I'm trying to find it.
it's below.
Below. Ah, okay.
Below.
Ah, okay, yes. All right. Okay, let's see. Many developing countries rely heavily on the sale of commodities such as oil, minerals, and some agricultural products for the majority of their exports. This reliance is called commodity dependency and is likely to result in difficulty for some countries. For example, when commodity prices fall, revenues from the sale of commodities will also fall, and the balance on the current account will worsen. There may also be a negative impact on employment, growth, fiscal balances, and exchange rates. So let me just explain this first paragraph. There's what we call commodity dependency, which means some countries rely heavily on the sale of their commodities to some countries.
Yeah.
So if those countries are not buying, or if there's problem in the world, you won't be able to sell, and it will bring about structural unemployment. Structural unemployment, fall in level of income, and the rest. That's about the first one. So some countries have made a special effort to reduce commodity dependency by planning for the future. For example, Uganda has proceeded carefully in developing its oil reserves. So here, some countries have started preparing for this. They don't want to depend on other countries. Like Nigeria now, there's Aliko Dangote, the richest man in Africa. He's a Nigerian. He started building oil rigs so that we don't rely on Shell and Chevron anymore. That's what they are saying here. So at the end of it all, let me just see. Let's just go to the graph. I think you guys said. So we have agricultural exports and agricultural imports. So over the year, agricultural imports has increased, right? Agricultural export has increased because this is for developing countries anyway. It has increased over the years from between in 1961 to 2000.
They both increased.
But there's decline in agricultural imports over the year because the developed countries, they don't even do, nobody does imports, nobody does import. Developed countries, they deal with services. So there's decline in primary sector. Do you understand? So let's go to the case study now. The multiple choice question. Which of the following statements is true of the information shown by the graph? Agricultural imports are falling over the period. Agricultural imports are falling over the period. Before 1980, agricultural exports exceed agricultural imports. Agricultural exports are falling over the period. Developing countries export more agricultural goods than developed countries.
I don't think it's A because imports, they haven't fallen. They're just
are falling over the period.
They're currently in decline. They haven't
They are not falling here. They are in decline.
Yeah.
When it comes to falling, it means reducing. Yeah.
Reduces.
Yeah, but this one it's in decline.
Not falling.
Yeah, it's in decline.
Yeah.
So it's not A, yes. And B, they said
before
80s. Agricultural export exceeds agricultural import. Export exceeds import before 80s. Yes. Export exceeds import.
Yes.
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 So the answer is B.
Yeah.
But let's go to other options before we finally agree or accept that.
Okay. Agricultural exports.
Wait, okay. Agricultural exports are falling over the period. Agricultural export is not falling. It's even increasing.
Yeah, please.
So it's not. It's not C. Then we'll go to D. Developing countries export more agricultural goods than developed countries. Here, developing countries export more agricultural goods than developed. Developing countries export more agricultural goods than developed countries. But basically here, they only talked about, okay, export more agricultural goods than developing countries. No. Let me go back to what they said. They said developing countries export more agricultural goods than developed countries. Let's see. Pattern of agricultural trade for developing countries. Exports. Developing countries are exporting more than developed countries. Well, this is just about developing countries. They are not showing us about developed countries.
Yeah.
So at the point we find the statistics for developed countries, we would have known.
Yeah.
Get the point here. The answer is trickish, but it is not D. They said developing countries. Developing countries export more agricultural goods than developed countries. Well, based on the pattern here, there's more developing countries have, it's about developing countries. what they have done. They are not comparing with developed countries. So we don't have statistics for developed countries. So we wouldn't know if developed countries do export of agricultural goods. But what we find out is that developing countries do more of exports than imports.
Yeah.
But not compared to developed countries. So we can't answer that. Do you understand what I'm saying here? The stats we have only explains developing country. It never explains developed countries. Is it clear?
Yeah.
So the answer is not D. So the answer is B. Any question about that? So that ends chapter 40, the World Trade Organization and World Trade Patterns. Can you help me check now